Welcome to the video of input-output tables and their components here in Module 4 of Input-Output Analysis. In the last video, we talked a little bit about the historic backgrounds and of input-output tables and gave you a one-time picture of an input-output table. Now we want to look more in detail into the components as we can see there. So this is the same table you've seen in the last video with this stylized input-output table of a three-sector economy. In gray here in the background, you see the intersectoral flows in matrix form. So every value that is written here by set is value that remains in the economy. These are flows from one sector to another sector. So they circle in the economy. Nothing leaves here the economy. And in order to further understand input-output tables, we also have to understand rows and columns, because in a matrix that matters. And a row here is that the output distribution for each sector. So who buys from whom, and in the first sector line here that I highlighted, this is the question, who buys from sector 1? So the value you have given in set 1,1 is the value that sector 1 buys from itself. In set 1,2, you have the value that sector 2 purchases from sector 1. Set 1,3 is the consumption of sector 3 of goods produced in sector 1. F1H here is the final household consumption. So this is what households in the economy, like you and me, purchases in goods from sector 1. There's also export here with F1X, and all of those 5 values add up to the total output. In a column, we have to look into the requirements that each sector has. So while the row was who buys from sector 1, the column gives you who sells to sector 1. So if you consider that set 1,1 was what sector 1 buys from sector 1, it is also the same amount that sector 1 sells to sector 1. Set 2,1 is what sector 1 sells to sector 2. So it's an input factor in sector 2. Set 3,1 is what sector 1 sells to sector 3. And then we have value added, where we add labor costs, where we add profits, subsidies, and other things that we will talk about later on, and all the inputs plus those value added add up to total input in the economy. There are things also leaving the economy, and I gave you an overview on the first slide here already with final demand. Final demand leaves the economy. If you think of it really stylized, this is the stuff that you eat. This is stuff that is exported. You put it in a package and you ship it abroad. So here we can show really how much consumption in the households is happening. That would be adding up F1H, F2H, F3H is the consumption of all households. Exports would be adding up all the exports, or we can look at consumption in a specific sector and exports in a specific sector. And all of that things give us a better overview of what happens with the goods produced in an economy. We can also check here, is a sector really important for the national economy, or is it only producing goods that are exported? So all of that kind of analysis is possible here by just looking at the numbers and no math needed. Value added is the primary factors of production. So if you're familiar with the classic literature in economics, you know already what primary factors in production are, but in general we talk here about labor, capital, and land. And capital here is really the machinery that we consider that is standing around, that is already invested in, because otherwise input factors flow into this intersection, in this intersectoral flow matrix. Here's the set part, but here it's really the capital, it is money, supporting as investment, production, and land that you own. Here the whole thing is a little bit more colored. And what we see here is also the more detailed. We again in gray have the intermediate consumption values which remain in the economy. In yellow, the final demand components. Here I stretched them out. So it's more than just the household and exports. I also introduced governmental consumption, stuff that the government buys. So here mostly, or a lot of military goods, for example, flow in, because that's not bought by the households and neither exported, but it's governmental consumption. There's also an important aspect of inventory changes. That means a company produces goods or services which it is not selling in a specific year, so they put them on the shelf. So we see changes in the inventory which actually matter for economic production, because production sometimes takes a lot of time to adjust to shocks. So a company, when its demand breaks away, is setting up a huge inventory, so later on it can sell that stuff while producing less. So we're balancing out intertemporal effects here. We also have value-added components. And I mentioned here already that we have wages, we have profits, we have depreciation, so the capital goods that lose their impact on the economy over years. And we have also taxes and subsidies flowing into here, which either provide more input or less input, depending if they are taxes or subsidies. Then we have imports here as well. So goods that the economy purchases from another country, stuff that is flowing in that you pay for, you're not actually producing it. And in green we have the total outputs and inputs, both in the same color, because they also have the same value for each sector.